Let me introduce you to Lead Zeppelin, a data-conscious band who makes music and manages that data inside Salesforce. Actually, to tell you the truth, Lead Zeppelin has only just moved their business data into Salesforce, and they keep hearing about data breaches. They are concerned, and rightfully so. But fear not, because they're assessing their org to see what can be done to keep their data safe. Join Lead Zeppelin in their Security Month Chronicle, where they secure their Salesforce org in just 30 days.
Oh no, all these breaches are happening just as we organize all our data on Salesforce. What do we do? Well, I know Salesforce has a lot of security features, but I haven't got a clue on how to implement them properly. Oh well, no better time to start learning than right now.
After realizing that their Salesforce org may not be as secure as they initially thought, Lead Zeppelin decided to get on the front foot and start learning everything that they can about Salesforce security. They want to lay a good, solid foundation, get the basics right first, and then build on from there. Let's see what they do in their first week.
Okay, so what we wanted to do was lay a good foundation for our security after moving all of our data into Salesforce. So the first thing that we did was we started building out some custom profiles, okay? So we got these 3 profiles: Basic, Songwriter, and System Administrator. The reason for, well, basically, none of these really have any permissions by default, and I'll talk about that more in a second. The real big difference between Basic and Songwriter is our Songwriters will log in from a very specific and different secure VPN environment to our Basic and System Administrator users, okay? So sitting on the profile, I'll jump into the Basic one now. The very next thing that we need to do is we need to set up our login IP ranges. The reason I'm using this one is because I don't want to show you how very secure IP range is. But essentially you'd set up a range for the IPs you want people to log in from when they're this profile. If they're not logging in from that IP, they will be banished. Basically putting up a wall saying, if you are from this location, you can come. If not, then you can't. It just adds an extra layer of security. Now, the reason also for the, if I jump back into profiles, the reason also for the custom System Administrator profile is because the System Administrator profile by default cannot have permissions removed. So it is standard and it cannot be touched. Essentially, the permissions are hard-coded on it. So Salesforce gives you something on that profile, it gives it to every user with that profile, which we don't want. So we've got a custom System Administrator profile there. Now, to give permissions on top, so like I said, Basic, Songwriter, they don't have permissions on the profile. So to give you individual permissions, we use permission sets. Now, we've got very, very granular permission sets, as you can see here. So every object has its own basic and full level access permission set. Now, rather than giving these one by one, which would be a nightmare, we then leverage permission set groups. So we have here just 2 permission set groups for starters. Again, we're laying a foundation, we're not getting everything perfect. But in Basic, we give access to all of the basic objects. And in Full, we give full access to all the objects that are Lead Zeppelin related. So if I jump into this permission set group and I go permission sets in group, what we'll see is all of our permission sets that are album distribution full, which gives read, create, edit, and delete. The basic ones are set up to just give read and create. Read and edit. I want to keep something in mind, and this is something that we did keep in mind during our development of our security foundation here, and that is the principle of least privilege. So by default, and I'll talk about this while talking over the org-wide default, the principle of least privilege is essentially planning and designing your permissions for the person in the team who will need the least level of access, is the easiest way that I can say it. So if you've got a salesperson, so you would think about a team of like 10 users, let's say, and you would identify of that team of people who needs the least level of access to do things, to access things, and you would design your entire profile or, permission set or permission set groups or whatever, essentially a set of access for that person, the person with the least level of access. And then you can add on top of that. Okay, so what we've done to enable that is to facilitate that, we have enabled every single object in the org-wide defaults internal to be private. What this means is, for example, leads. If I create a lead, I own that lead. If I'm the owner of that lead, I can see that lead, and that's mine. But if somebody's not the owner of a lead, they can't see it unless we're giving access through hierarchies, which we'll talk about in a second. There are sharing rules, which we can layer on top, but we wanted to start by getting this org-wide defaults correct. Now we can grant access through hierarchies, but what do the hierarchies look like? Well, this is them. So we've got a very basic hierarchy. We've got our band manager sitting at the top there, the band members sitting underneath them, and junior band members sitting underneath them, because we're always training new staff. Distributions manager, same thing, and you got distributions team member and events director. Now, let's say the junior band member owns a record, a lead, right? They will, because we've got the grant access using hierarchies, then the band member and the band manager will both have access to the leads that are owned by junior band members. However, if a band member owns a lead, the junior band member won't by default be able to see that, but the band manager will. Also, because we've got different branches of the role hierarchy, anything that is owned by somebody in the band manager, branch will not be able to be visible to the distributions team or to the events team.
Okay, good. Not perfect, but we're getting there. Slow and steady. I'm confident in the firm foundation that we've laid this week. Time for a jam sesh, I reckon.
Lead Zeppelin has begun their journey in the world of Salesforce security. The foundation is laid, and it's time for them to ensure that their users' access is protected properly. They research what functions they can leverage to help protect their org from being accessed by attackers, and decide to take immediate action. I wonder how they'll do this. Let's watch.
So I've enabled multi-factor authentication, which is why I'm seeing this screen now. So basically what that means is to log into my account, you need to have something you know, a username and password. You know your username, you know your password. And you also need to have something that you have, right? In this case, that's my mobile phone with my authenticator app that happens to have this particular credential in it, okay? I'm just gonna go in and input my authentication code. Great, so I've just input my authentication code and I'm now presented with this new screen that you may not recognize. This is what's called a login flow. It's essentially a screen flow that runs as the user is logging into the system. In this case, we've leveraged our screen flow, our login flow, to basically remind people about the importance of protecting their data and their credentials, and to never use their business data for purposes that are not explicitly for the business. So I'm going to click login and proceed. And then the next thing that I want to show you is a page called Session Settings. So Session Settings is an extremely powerful page. There's a whole bunch of permissions here that you should pay attention to. One of the key ones here, we've got timeout values, right? So when a user logs in, they've authenticated a session. What you can do is you can set your timeout value to somewhere between 24 hours and 15 minutes. And then after such time, because I've got forced logout on session timeout, once their session is up, they will be logged out of the system and forced to re-authenticate. Basically making sure that, their access to the system is timed, and that, if somebody else gains access to the system through, a logged in user, for example, then they'll be kicked out after a short period of time. Now, if, for example, we identified that there is a user whose account has been breached, let's say it's through a physical, somebody's logged in and then somebody's got access to their computer, the admin's notified, they can reset the user's password, and there's also this terminate all of a user's sessions when an admin resets that user's password. If this was turned on like that, basically the user would then, the attacker would then be booted out of the system, because all of the sessions related to that user will be terminated and they would lose access. There's all sorts of other, important security features in here that you should definitely make yourself aware of. I don't have time to go through them all today, but very, very important. Now, something else that I wanted to talk about was, I'm looking at network access. So network access, where I can set up a trusted IP range for the org, basically saying the list below contains IP address ranges from sources that your organization trusts. Users logging into Salesforce.com with a browser from trusted networks are allowed to access Salesforce without having to activate their computers. This is another way, in addition to the IP login ranges on the profiles. This is sort of a more company-wide thing. It allows for a little bit easier logging in from a trusted IP range. Again, so going back to profiles, actually, let me just show you what that looks like on a profile. So if I wanted to make sure that, the songwriters, for example, were only able to access the system from a certain login IP range, I can go down to the profile, I go to login IP ranges, and I create a start and an end IP range. Now, something else that we can do on the profile is have them log in from a certain set of hours. Login hours, here we go. And we've set some up actually for the songwriter profile, so I'll go ahead and show you those. essentially Monday through Friday, or Monday through Thursday, the songwriters tend to work between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. So we've set them up and enabled them to work inside of those times. Friday's a little bit different. They clock off early on a Friday night, but then they come back on a Saturday, and sometimes I'll have a jam session from midday to 2 p.m. And Sundays, they don't work, right? So we've set the start and the end times to be identical, basically meaning that they do not log in on a Sunday. So anybody with the songwriter profile will only be able to access the system during those times specified, in addition to the IP ranges that we talked about. So that's a few extra levels of security that we've implemented this week. Now we've got multi-factor authentication, so you've got to have something that you have, like an authenticator app, as well as something you know, so your username and password. We've also set up that login flow to remind people about what they need to do in terms of data protection, that it's everybody's responsibility. There's the session settings page, which you need to review and make sure that you've got set up correctly for your organization. There's all sorts of super powerful tools and tweaks in there that you can do to make sure that your sessions are being protected. Trusted IP ranges, we talked about the trusted IP range for the organization itself, where you can set up basically a safety zone in terms of IP ranges. And additionally, on the profile, you can set up an IP range that will only allow the profile to log in from that IP range, trusted or not. As in, whether they've authenticated previously or not. And login hours as well. We can set it so that profiles will only be able to access Salesforce during specific hours through the week that are specified at the profile level. So that's week 2. We've certainly stepped off on the right foot, and next week we're going to be looking into some more advanced access features.
Oh, that's better. Our org is becoming more and more secure by the minute. Not perfect, but better. All right, time for my reward. Another jam sesh.
Now that their users are locked down tight, Lead Zeppelin turned their attention to their data and metadata. They want to ensure that users are only able to access data that they need to, limiting the scope of a breach if one were to occur. This is a smart move. Let's watch them at work.
All right, we are moving in the right direction. So the last 2 weeks, we set up a basic level of security, and then we've layered on top of it. This week, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on data and field level access. In fact, we're going to be starting with field level access. So inside of Object Manager on the account, for example, what I can do is I can jump onto a field, let's say the active custom field that's on here, and I can go in here and see set field level security. So on this page, this will show the profiles that have access to that particular field and what level of access they've got, whether it's visible or read only. You can also layer on top of this inside of permission sets. So again, if we removed all of the access to the field from the profile, which we can see we have here for the basic and songwriter profiles for Lead Zeppelin, we can layer on top inside of permission set, go into the object settings and give access to those fields that we require that way. You can also semi-restrict, I won't say you'll be able to restrict, but you can semi-restrict the fields by using lightning pages as well. Just something to be aware of. But you can see, again, at a glance, what profiles have access to what fields. And if you look at a permission set or you look at a user and use the view summary function, you'll be able to also see which fields that they have access to. Now, let's talk more about sharing rules. So we had a little bit of a look, if I look at sharing settings, in week 1 at the org-wide defaults. So I talked about lead, if it's private, that means that by default, if you own the lead, you can see it. Anybody above you can see it, but that's it. And what I didn't talk about too much was sharing rules. So a sharing rule will be if you want to, by default, across your org, give additional access to additional records that are not covered by the org-wide defaults. So what we can do is we give it a name, description, all that sort of stuff. Then so select your rule type. Basically, what kind of leads do you want to be sharing out? Okay, is it based on the record owner? So who owns them? You want to share it out. If it's owned by, a certain queue or a certain user or whatever, or a user that holds whatever field value on their user, then you can share out the records like that. Or probably more likely is based on criteria. So for example, if we're doing it based on lead and we want to go where, bad example, but email does not contain, Salesforce.com. What that means is if basically we're saying, as long as the email address doesn't contain the Salesforce.com domain, then it will be shared out to whoever else, okay? Or if it does contain, salesforce.com, then we're going to share it out. Who are we going to share it to? Well, here we go. We got public groups. We got all internal users. I can just share it, basically say, if it's a salesforce.com lead, we want everybody who has access to leads to be able to see it. That's one way. You can share them out to individual roles as well. So we got all our roles that we talked about as well in week 1, or roles and subordinates as well. So I'm just going to go public groups, all internal. Now, what level of access do we want to give? Do we want to just let them see the leads, or do we want to let them edit the leads and write to those lead records as well? So we can control all of that using sharing rules. Now, for those edge cases as well, where the org-wide defaults don't cover it, the sharing rules that are laid on top don't cover it, you can also manually share out a record that you have access to be able to manually share out. So if you're the owner of a lead and you basically want a colleague in a different team to go, hey, can you put your eyes over this real quick? You can manually share out that record as well. You'll notice, okay, is everything so far, except for the muting permission sets instead of permission set groups that we talked about, everything is layering on top new permissions. What we haven't done at all as yet is taken away any permissions, okay? So let's talk about that next. Restriction rules. What are restriction rules? Well, restriction rules basically allow you to restrict or add, you're basically putting a permission on that cuts back the level of access or the level of functionality that a user will have over a particular thing. Okay, so filtering, and you can see that this is a visual on, I've just got the album distribution custom object. We're going into the restriction rules section in Object Manager, and we can see that org-wide defaults and sharing mechanisms, whether that's role hierarchy, sharing rules, or whatever, give access. And then you got a filter which refines the access. So restriction rules, we can filter records based on user and record criteria. So think of these as like the anti-sharing rules, right? So you can select, give it a full name, description, all that sort of thing. Then we set the criteria for the user, so which user this restriction rule applies to, and the criteria of the record. So what kind of user do we want to hide this kind of record from, essentially? And that is restriction rules. There's one last thing I wanted to talk about for those more complex scenarios, and that is the share records. So related to every record, really, is what's known as a share record, okay? This gives you access, or gives people access to the records inside of Salesforce. So if you ever have a complex scenario where, by default, again, the sharing rules don't cover it, the org-wide defaults don't cover it, manual sharing could cover it, but it would be a nightmare to have to manage and set up. You can set up a share record. So if I go here, var account share, this is an account share record. Every object has a share object next to it. For custom objects, it'll be, custom _share, for example. And with the account one, it's a little bit more complex. You got the account ID, i.e. the account that you want to share, the user group ID, or in other words, which user or group do you want to share it to, the row cause, so why are we doing this, or what's the reason? There's a number of values there. We've just got manual here. And then the level of access to the object, which is either read-only or whatever else, that you need to grant out. Account has case, opportunity, and contact as well, because it's a top-level object. Basically, by inserting one of these, we're saying, okay, this user or group will have access to this record, okay? And this is why, and this is the kind of access. So you can do that either with Flow or with Apex as well. You can automate it, or we've got a complex configuration screen, which allows the user to put in a number of values that then calculates who it needs to be shared to. So that's a bunch of additional stuff that we've laid on this week. We've gone through the field level security, making sure that the fields on each object are locked down only to the users that need to see and or edit them. We've got sharing rules, which expand upon the org-wide defaults, basically saying, okay, lead records or whatever records that match this criteria, we want to share out to users that match this criteria. In other words, are a part of a group or whatever it is. We've got manual sharing as well for whenever that's not covered. There's a bit more complex, when manual sharing would do, but it would be a nightmare to manage. We want to automate it using Apex or Flow with the share records, and restriction rules as well give you the ability to say, okay, by default, whatever's there, we want to cut it back for these users and for these particular record types that they should not have access to. So that's week 3. Next week, man, it's the last week. I can't believe it. Already up to week 4. We're going to be going through some more advanced things.
Oh, we're on a roll. Rock and roll. Our org's gone from a sitting duck to Fort Knox. I reckon one more week of this and we'll truly have a secure Salesforce org.
Lead Zeppelin has made some real progress when it comes to securing their org. But they're not quite done yet. They've learned about advanced security features like Salesforce Shield and third-party tools that are bound to help keep their org secure. I'm excited to see what they learned this week.
Okay, so we're on the final stretch now. We've done the basics. So now we're sort of looking into some more advanced features. The first one I'm going to talk about, it's kind of a bit of a cop-out, but it is Salesforce Shield. So Salesforce Shield, we've been recommended. It's a suite basically of different tools that we can leverage. So there's event monitoring, which basically will give us the ability to see when certain things have happened inside of the system. More or less, we'll then be able to ideally proactively, as we can see with real-time monitoring, we'll be able to proactively identify if there are any behavioral differences that our users are doing that are abnormal, and we'll be able to identify breaches relatively quickly, or potentially even as they're happening. If I move forward to platform encryption, this is advanced encryption for Salesforce data, as well as files and attachments and all that sort of thing. And then we've got field audit trail as well, which basically enhances the amount of fields that you can track, how long the data is kept for, etc. There are some additional tools with Shield too, but the key one that we wanted to look at actually was event monitoring, because of its sort of ability to predict not the future, but identify when things are not right and be able to address them relatively quickly. Now, obviously, this is something that we haven't done yet, and something that not everybody has access to, so it may not be beneficial to you either. But something that you will have access to is Salesforce Flow. So there is something else you can do with Salesforce Flow in Apex. I'll show you in Flow and just sort of hypothetically talk about it for Apex. But there's this feature, if you go up to the little cog inside of a flow and you go Show Advanced, you'll be able to see how to run the flow. So this is by default, how the flow is launched determines whether the flow runs in the context of the user or the system. If you choose system context with sharing, the flow respects org-wide default settings, role hierarchies, sharing roles, manual sharing, teams and territories, all the stuff that we've set up over the last few weeks, but it doesn't respect object permissions, field level access, or other permissions of the running user. If you choose system context without sharing, the flow can access all data. So user or system context depends how the flow is launched. This is kind of the default one. System context with sharing means with sharing, taken into account essentially. It enforces the record level access. And system context without sharing means system context without the sharing rules being respected and without the sharing rules being applied. So you really got to be careful when you give this level of access to a flow. You need to make sure that that the user who is, anybody that has access to this flow, A, knows what they're doing, and B, it's extremely restricted to only when it's absolutely necessary. But yeah, make sure you're setting the running context of the flow. Similar with Apex. So in Apex, you can have, with or without sharing as well inside of the individual method. Something else I wanted to talk about was backup solutions. So something to keep in mind is that if your data, if something happens to your Salesforce org, number one, you want to make sure that your data is protected and backed up so that you can recover and get back on the road as soon as possible. But it's very important when you're backing up your data to protect that data as if it was in production. Okay, so something that we've been taught is that a lot of these breaches are coming from sandbox environments or from environments where they don't have the same degree of protection that a production environment does. But if one of your customers has their data breach, they're not going to care which environment it came out of. They're just going to care that it came out of an environment that you were supposed to be looking after. So make sure that whatever backup and recovery tool that you're leveraging, as well as whatever other sandbox and development tools you're using as well, are protected. So Salesforce offers backup and recovery through data backup and recovery inside of Salesforce. But there are third-party options as well, which may be better suited to you. The final thing I wanted to talk about was there are a number of Apex tools, a number of admin tools that we have. So the session management we talked about, the setup audit trail as well, which basically shows what has happened in an org. I just wanted to show you this list here, which is login history. Now this login history can be extremely valuable to an admin because you'll be able to see things like where people logged in where people logged in from, what sort of connection that they were connecting with, and the country that they were based in as well. So yeah, extremely beneficial to an admin to be able to go in and figure out what's going on with a particular user. If something seems like, hey, this user is not doing what they normally do, let's say you do go ahead and you enable event monitoring, and they're doing things from an IP address that are not normal to them, it's likely not that user, okay? So login history is extremely valuable on that front. There are a lot of tools inside of Salesforce that are, but once you've laid your foundation, it's good to know about these tools. So again, this week, we've looked into Salesforce Shield, so advanced security tools for Salesforce. They do cost extra, of course, on top of your standard Salesforce license, but they may be worth it in the long run, honestly, given the value that they add to your business in terms of protecting your customer data. There's automation security. So again, for the flows, you want to be careful what context that they're running in, and same with Apex as well. You got to be careful whether you've enabled the sharing rules to be respected or not, or the sharing functions within Salesforce, I should say, not just sharing rules, to be respected or not. You need to consider your backup and restoration solution, number one. But number two, any third-party application that you've got or any development environment that you're connecting to your Salesforce org or that holds your business data. You need to make sure that it's as protected as production, because again, it's your customer data regardless of where it sits, and it's very important to protect that. Finally, there are the admin tools that we got access to, things like the setup audit trail, the login history access that you got on a user. You can see where a user's logged in from, if they've succeeded, if they've failed. Really, really handy to see if it's, if potentially you may be facing a breach of a particular user. Oh, and there we go. That is a month of spending time learning about Salesforce security and understanding how we can protect our data, and going ahead and implementing some of those changes, as well as some changes that we can look at down the track, such as Salesforce Shield. So thank you for joining us. I'll see you in a second.
Wow, what a journey. Lead Zeppelin have gone from being complete newbies in the security realm to having a more secure org than most Salesforce customers. They can sleep easy knowing that they have done the right thing by putting as many barriers as they can think of to defend against attackers.
Oh, time for a deep breath. We can relax now knowing that we've laid a good foundation for security in our Salesforce org in just 30 days. I know security is never finished, but I'm pretty confident in the assessment that we've done and the action that we've taken.
Lead Zeppelin are returning to full-time rock and roll, knowing the steps that they have taken to protect their org will make any attacker's day a whole lot harder. Thanks for joining them on their journey securing their Salesforce org in 30 days. I hope you've learned a lot, because I can see that Lead Zeppelin sure did. Let us know what you thought about Lead Zeppelin's journey in the comments below.